Hi everyone and welcome to Photoshop tutorial number 7. This is about layer masks and the paste into technique. Now as I mentioned last time in tutorial 6, we spent a lot of time looking at selection methods and techniques because those are really one of the key skills that you need to do really high quality photo montage, because if we want to extract an image from a photo, if you remember last time we looked at this photo and paste it into another image or photograph, that element, in this case Danny on the bike, has to be selected very carefully, or you'll see kind of a fringe around the edge that indicates that it doesn't belong in this photograph, and that's a dead giveaway. If you have any kind of fringing, or you bring a little bit of the sand in here or the plants in the background, you don't have to look at it for a second to know that it's been fabricated, and we're trying to make these images seamless. So let's go through the process. This is a relatively short tutorial to show you how this works. And it's using the skills that I've already shown you in tutorial 6, part 1 and 2. So since I already have a selection saved, you remember I think we talked about you can save selections as you make them. Well, I have one saved called Danny. So, and if it's not showing up, you just click on this list here, click OK, and you can see it's loaded that in. And if I go back to my quick mask, you can see that there it's pretty tight around him. Missing a little bit on the tire here, but not going to worry about that. So now I can just do a copy, which would be the Control C, or you can use the edit menu. But since I have a layer selected, if I just do Control C, that will copy what's in there. Now I'm going to switch to my other document. Now, for the sake of this demonstration, I've already created a layer called Danny1. I know it's empty because I made sure it was cleared out, and if that's the case, it will paste right into that layer. So when I do a Control V or paste from the edit menu, now I've just grabbed the move tool and you can see how I can move him around a little bit and position him. So, and I've got a blue line across there that represents the horizon line. So why don't we stick him kind of right in there. He's on a bike, he's a little taller than average, so right there in front of the please keep off grass sign. But of course, as we'll talk about later, we've already looked at in last tutorial, we can just come in here and resolve that problem very quickly. Just going to select that, do edit, fill, content aware, and we take care of that problem. So let's go back to Danny layer. Now that we have him in position, if we're just pasting him into this document, now, here's actually an example. You can see up here the selection's pretty good. Right here around the tire, you can see a little bit of fringe there, and that's not any good. This looks perfect right here, and maybe a little back there. And sometimes it's hard to avoid. Now, you can go back and reselect it. Probably the easiest thing here would be just to zoom in on that and get the eraser tool and come in and just erase that out of there to make sure that we're not getting any of those highlights around there. But again, the better job you do at extracting this in the first place, the less of that work you have to do in here. And ideally, once you've extracted some elements, like Danny, you have people or cars or other types of things, and you clean them up, it's probably not a bad idea to then select him. And I can just demonstrate this now. Once he's on a separate layer, I can just do a quick rectangle around him. Doesn't have to be careful. I can do a Control C for copy. I'm going to go to the File menu and choose New. It knows what size object is in the clipboard. I click OK, and then I just paste. And I've got a background that I can turn off or on, so I can export him without having to reselect it with a transparent background. So this isn't necessary for the demonstration I'm doing now, but just so if you've gone to the trouble to extract an element that you might reuse, and certainly if you and your peers, your colleagues are doing this, you can build up a library, share things with each other, and use them interchangeably in your photo montage work. That's just fine. Okay, so as I mentioned, if he's here, this is fine, but let's say I want to move him over to here, and basically he's not going to be up on top of the bench, right? So now we've got a little bit of a problem. He's sitting here, and we want to show him behind the bench, but obviously the photograph is the base layer, so you can't put him behind there. but there actually is a way to get him to appear to be behind there, and that's what the paste into method and layer masks are used for. So what I'm going to do first then, I can see the general area that I want to see him in. So I'm going to, well, I'll make the selection. Oh, actually, I'm going to move him back out of the way. And what I want to do to use this method is to actually create a selection where I want Danny to appear once I paste him into this document. And by using the paste into technique, he will only be visible in those spaces. So for starters, and I'm not going to take a huge amount of time for the demonstration, but I wanted to show up in this area because he's going to show up there anyway. And then I want him to be visible in any of these open parts of the bench. So to start with, I'm going to start right under here. And again, your selection method, you could use the magnetic wand. You could start with other tools. I'm going to start with this, and then I'm just going to loop up and around, come up here, and close that. Again, my layer masks, I come in here, you can see I didn't do a great job on that, but if I switch to my black paint, I can come in here and close that in, refine that. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm not going to take a lot of time to make this perfect. I think you get the idea. I can switch back to my white, come in here. Probably I could use the shift key so I can constrain this. And otherwise, I'm going to keep going back and forth over that leg. Okay, so I've got this started. I'll add this in here. And I'll add this in here. Okay, so let's go back to our regular mode. Now, I can do the same thing with my lasso tool, and maybe this is a case where I might want to go to the polygonal lasso tool. Oops. First thing I need to do is make sure I choose add to selection, or the rest of my hard work there will disappear. So I can just come in here, click on these points, and this is probably a pretty good method because there are straight edges. So again, I click once, click again, click again. Click here, and if I move till I see the little circle pop up, I can just tap once and it will close that. Now, in this case, I'm going across that plant that's in there, and this isn't really straight, so I'm clicking a bunch of times. And again, I can clean that up. I could go back to my paint mode, zoom in on this a little bit, get my paintbrush, come in here, really quickly clean that up. Keep painting over this just to get the little spot, even this little piece here, if I wanted to show up in that little slot there. I've got another little triangle here, and I've got this slot here. So again, this does take a little bit of effort, but this is one of those things that if you really want something to appear that it's been integrated into your original photograph, this is the only way to do it. Now, I could have, when you saw me paste that in there originally, I could have gone over and just erased the parts of Danny that I didn't want to see, and it would look like he's behind the bench. The problem is, if you decide later that, well, you like Danny there, but because you put something else and you want to move him over a foot or a certain distance, because you've erased part of the original image away, you can't really do that, because as soon as you move him, you'll find out that there's holes in him now because you erased part of that image. This is called a non-destructive method, and that just means that we can conceal or expose part of an image with the paste into technique, but the whole image is there, so we can edit it later if we want to, and we can actually edit the layer mask later. So if we decide at some point we can move Danny over so far, like over here, that he still is invisible, because the layer mask is only where you see the red right here. And so, but you'll see in a second when we do the paste into technique that the layer mask is a separate part of the layer, and we can edit that as well. So we can change the area that he's allowed to be seen in. Okay, so now that we've got that done, I want to switch back to our regular selection mode. And now instead of doing a paste, we'll go to paste special and paste into. And now what you can see when I grab the move tool is that I can move Danny anywhere inside that space, but as soon as I move him outside, he disappears. So I can see him behind the bench if I want to put him down here, but probably he would be up close to the horizon line. And if I've done my job, you won't see any artifacts in there as I move him around. So that's how we can actually place him so he looks like he's right in the photograph. Now, you'll notice over here in the layers dialog box now that this is what's called a layer mask. And the easiest way to understand this is to think of the black as a piece of black construction paper. If you had a photograph and you had a black construction paper that you placed over it, if this was all black, you couldn't see the photograph. If you take a pair of scissors and cut a hole out, you'll be able to see whatever's on the original photograph through that hole. And if you take this paper and you move it around, which I can actually do too, because you'll notice I can now select the layer, the image part of the layer, or the layer mask part of the layer. There's two separate pieces here. If I have this active, I can use the move tool and I can actually move the layer mask. It's like sliding that paper, that black construction paper around, and you can see the shape of that image that I can move it wherever I want. I'll undo that and put it back in the same place. So that gives us a lot of flexibility. I can still completely edit Danny. I can paint over him. I can erase him. I can change colors. I can do color adjustments. I can do anything I want to this part of the image. And I can move him and he still only becomes visible. Now, because you can see I can move him out here, occasionally you'll do a paste into and you won't be able to see anything. So in that case, just grab the move tool and start moving around. Because sometimes they come in outside the selection area. Usually not, but sometimes they do. So it's just important to remember that if you don't see it right away, check the layer. If you see the image, you know it's there. You'll be able to see the thumbnail. It's off to the left or it's off to the right, and move that into place. So that's the paste into method. You can also create a layer mask by just making a selection. I have a layer here that's already done. That's this version of Danny. So if I come in here, I'm just going to do a rectangular one so it's easy for you to see. I make a selection. I have this layer active. I can come down here and choose new layer mask. And you notice that all of a sudden now that rectangle is the only place I can see him. And you can see the icon here. So you can do it either way, but the paste into technique automatically creates that layer mask for you. Now, one difference, if you're looking carefully, you'll notice is that what I just did in this case, Danny 1, the layer mask and the layer photo or the layer image part are linked together. So if I move any one of them, the other one moves with it, which is not usually what you want. So what I would do is unlink this. If this is linked and I go to move Danny around, it's actually, it's moving the layer mask with him, so I'll never be able to see more than that part of him. If I unlink these, now I can move Danny around, and when he gets to the edge of the layer mask. Now, there may be a times in some graphic design situations where you would want that to clip that part of the image no matter where you put it. For photo montage work, generally you want that layer mask to stay exactly where you placed it in the first place, and then you move the image part of the layer around inside of that. Okay, so that's the basic method. Then the steps are really, one, you make the selection that you want the new element to appear inside of. You copy your element from another document, and instead of choosing just a plain paste, you go choose paste special and paste into. And once you do that, it will create this layer mask. If for some reason you see a link there, you want to uncheck that link, and just remember also that once you've created this, you have to pay attention when you select this layer on what you're clicking on. If you click this, you're actually selecting the layer mask. So if you're trying to do a tonal or a color adjustment, nothing will happen because you're selecting the wrong thing. You have to make sure you select the image part of the layer mask. Okay, so that's a pretty short tutorial, but hopefully that helps you understand that technique. And that's, again, like I said, one of the key techniques for bringing a new element into a photograph and making it appear that it was part of the original element.